The battlefield was silent now, except for the distant echoes of smoke and fire that still rose into the dim sky. Hours earlier, the land had been filled with noise, the clash of weapons, the cries of the wounded, and the endless storm of destruction. Now only the ruined earth and broken machines remained as reminders of the fight. Xerath lay on the ground, weak and wounded. Her dark armor was cracked in several places, and one of her arms trembled as she tried to push herself upright. She had been the commander of her squad, leading her people with pride. But the battle had gone wrong. The humans had fought with a strange mix of courage and unpredictability that had shattered her plans. She breathed heavily, tasting the dust in the air. In her mind, she prepared herself for what she believed was certain: capture or death. Her leaders had told her countless times what humans were like. They had called them merciless. They had painted a picture of beings who destroyed everything in their path. If she had fallen into the hands of a human soldier, there could be no hope. The sound of footsteps reached her ears. Slow, steady, and unhurried, Xerath turned her head and saw him. The human soldier moved with purpose, a weapon held at the ready. His uniform was torn and dirt-stained, but his movements carried a calm confidence. His eyes, sharp and alert, locked onto her as he came closer. Xerath's heart raced. She had expected many things in this war, but to face death directly like this was something different. She thought of her people, of her training, of every warning she had been told. Humans kill without hesitation, she reminded herself. They end their enemies because it is their nature. When the human finally stopped a few steps away, he raised his weapon slightly. Xerath froze. She tried to lift her chin, refusing to show fear. If she was going to die, she would at least face it with dignity. But then something happened that she did not expect. The human soldier did not fire. He looked at her, studying her condition. His eyes shifted from her broken armor to the wound along her shoulder, and then down to the way she struggled even to keep herself upright. Slowly, he lowered his weapon. Xerath blinked in confusion. She could not believe what she had just seen. The human spoke, his voice calm but firm. "You are not in a position to fight anymore. Killing you now would serve no purpose." Xerath stared at him, unsure if she had understood correctly. Was this a trick? Was he simply delaying the inevitable? She wanted to ask, but her pride kept her silent. The human crouched down and placed his weapon on the ground beside him, within reach but not aimed at her. He reached into a small pack at his side and pulled out a container of water. Without saying another word, he held it out toward her. Xerath's eyes narrowed. In all her life, no human had ever been described this way. She had been told they were violent, cold, and selfish. Yet here stood one who offered her water instead of death. Her throat was dry and every part of her body begged for relief, but her mind screamed caution. "Why?" she asked, her voice weak and raspy. The human tilted his head slightly. "Because you are still alive. That is reason enough." The word struck her harder than any weapon. She tried to understand. In her culture, mercy was rare. To spare an enemy was seen as weakness, as a danger that could lead to betrayal. Yet this human seemed to believe the opposite. She hesitated for a long moment, but finally her strength gave in. With trembling fingers, she reached for the container. The human did not move against her, did not tighten his grip to keep it from her. He simply allowed her to take it. The water touched her lips, and she drank slowly. It felt strange to accept such a gift from someone she had considered her enemy only moments ago. When she handed the container back, the human gave a small nod. "You should not move too much. The wound on your shoulder will need attention." Xerath narrowed her eyes again. "You speak as if you are protecting me." "I am," the human answered simply. She let out a bitter laugh, though it came out weak and broken. "Protecting your enemy? That is foolish. You should finish me now while you have the chance." The human picked up his weapon but still kept it lowered. He looked at her with a calm expression that unsettled her more than any threat could have. "I do not kill those who cannot fight back. That is not who I am." Xerath felt something strange stir inside her. Confusion mixed with anger, and yet beneath it all was a small spark of curiosity. Could this human truly mean what he said? Or was it some clever strategy to win her trust before striking? She studied him closely. His face carried lines of exhaustion, and his eyes spoke of battles fought and survived. But there was also something else in them. A quiet strength that did not come from cruelty but from conviction. The silence stretched between them as the smoke from the battlefield drifted past. Xerath could feel her heartbeat slowing. not from calm but from the realization that the future she had imagined, a swift and merciless death, had not come. Instead, something entirely unexpected had taken its place. The human stood again and offered her a hand. "You cannot stay here. It is not safe." "Can you walk?" Zirath looked at his hand as if it were a strange weapon. Every instinct told her not to take it. Every lesson told her it was a trap. But another part of her, a quieter and more uncertain part, whispered that maybe she should see where this path led. Her pride kept her from accepting his hand. But she forced herself to push up from the ground on her own. Pain flared through her body and her knees nearly gave way, but she managed to stand. The human gave no mocking words, no threats. He only waited, watching her carefully in case she fell. When she finally steadied herself, he gave another small nod. "Good, stay close. There may still be dangers nearby." As he turned and began to walk, Zirath followed with slow, uneven steps. She did not know why she chose to move after him. Perhaps it was survival. Perhaps it was curiosity. Or perhaps, deep down, she wanted to understand why a human soldier had chosen to spare her life. Whatever the reason, the path ahead was no longer what she had expected. The war was still raging beyond the horizon, but in this moment on this ruined battlefield, something had shifted, and Zirath knew one thing with certainty. This encounter would change everything she thought she knew about humans. The night came quietly, covering the battlefield in shadows. The smoke that had once filled the air had grown thinner, drifting into the dark sky like fading memories of war. Only the distant rumble of machines and the occasional flash of light on the horizon reminded them that the fighting was still not over. Elias walked carefully through the broken land. His steps were steady, though his shoulders carried the weight of exhaustion. Behind him, Zirath followed slowly, her movements uneven from the wound on her shoulder. She refused to lean on him, even when her legs shook from weakness. Pride still held her upright, but Elias could see how much effort it cost her. They had moved away from the battlefield where she had fallen. Now they crossed a stretch of ruined ground where shattered metal lay half buried in the dirt. The silence between them was heavy, broken only by the sound of their footsteps and the low hum of the night insects. Finally, Elias stopped near the remains of an old transport vehicle that had been abandoned. Its metal shell was scorched, but one side offered shelter from the wind. He looked at Zirath. "We will rest here," he said. She hesitated, scanning the area with sharp eyes. To her, every shadow could hold danger. She had been raised to believe that humans thrived in such tricks, setting traps, using kindness as bait. But she could not deny her body was at its limit. With a slow nod, she lowered herself against the wreckage, her armor scraping the ground. Elias set down his pack and began to search through it. He pulled out a small kit of supplies. Zirath watched him carefully, her hand resting close to the edge of her weapon, though she lacked the strength to use it. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Your wound," Elias answered simply. "It needs to be cleaned and wrapped or you will not last long." Zirath narrowed her eyes. "You would waste your supplies on me? An enemy?" Elias looked at her without hesitation. "You are alive. That is enough reason." The same words again, simple, direct, but impossible for her to understand. In her world, resources were guarded closely. To give something valuable to an enemy was madness. Yet here he was opening a small container and preparing a bandage. When he reached toward her shoulder, she flinched back. "Do not touch me," she snapped. Elias did not move closer. He waited, his eyes calm. "If you prefer to suffer, that is your choice. But infection does not care what side you are on." Zirath looked at him for a long moment. Every instinct told her not to trust. Yet the pain in her shoulder was sharp, and her strength was fading faster with each passing hour. Slowly, reluctantly, she gave a small nod. "Do it quickly." Elias leaned closer, his movement steady and careful. He poured a small amount of liquid onto the wound. Zirath hissed as the sting spread through her shoulder. For a moment her pride cracked and she clenched her teeth to keep from crying out. Elias said nothing. He only worked in silence, cleaning the blood and wrapping the wound with firm, practiced hands. His touch was gentle, though his face remained serious. When he finished, he tied the bandage neatly and leaned back. "There," he said. "It should hold for now." Zirath flexed her fingers, testing the arm. The pain was still there, but it felt more bearable. She looked at him with narrowed eyes. "Why do this? Why waste your strength on me?" Elias met her gaze without flinching. Because I do not believe in killing the helpless. And because sometimes the smallest act of mercy can mean more than any victory in battle. His words struck her again. Mercy. It was a word she rarely heard among her people. To them, mercy was weakness. Yet here was a soldier who believed it was a kind of strength. She looked away, uncomfortable. You speak as if kindness is a weapon. Not a weapon, Elias said softly. But a choice. A choice that can change the future. The fire of suspicion burned in her chest. Was this his true plan? To use kindness to weaken her? To make her question herself until she lost her edge? But when she looked back at him, she saw no trick in his eyes. Only quiet conviction. As the night deepened, the air grew colder. Elias gathered scraps of metal and dry grass, working patiently to build a small fire. Zerath watched him, still caught between mistrust and curiosity. When the flames finally flickered to life, the light touched both their faces. Zerath studied Elias in silence. He was not what she had expected a human to be. His armor was worn, his uniform patched, yet his spirit seemed unbroken. She wondered how many battles he had fought, how many lives he had spared instead of ending. Tell me, she said finally, her voice low, is this what all humans are like? Do all of your kind spare enemies? Elias shook his head. No, each human is different. Some choose mercy, others choose hatred. That is why choice matters. It defines who we are. Zerath frowned. Among my people there is no choice. We are taught to follow. To kill when commanded. To show mercy is to betray. Elias poked at the fire with a piece of metal, his eyes reflecting the light. Then perhaps that is why we fight. Not just for land or survival, but for the right to decide who we want to be. The words settled between them like a heavy stone. Zerath leaned back against the wreckage, staring into the fire. She thought of her leaders, of the orders she had followed without question. She thought of the soldiers she had lost today. Lives ended because of decisions made far above her. And now, sitting across from her was a human who believed that every individual could choose their own path. The idea unsettled her more than the wound in her shoulder. Hours passed. The fire crackled softly and the silence grew less sharp. Zerath felt her body relaxing despite herself, her exhaustion pressing down on her. Elias remained awake, keeping watch, his eyes scanning the darkness. At last she spoke again. If you believe so strongly in choice, then tell me this. Why did you choose to save me, knowing I could rise again tomorrow and fight against you? Elias looked at her, his face calm, his voice steady. Because if I chose to kill you now, then I would be no better than the image your people have of us. And I will not let that be the truth of who I am. Zerath's breath caught. For the first time, she saw not just a soldier, but something deeper. A will that refused to be shaped by fear or hatred. She turned away quickly, hiding the confusion on her face. She had expected death. Instead, she found herself caught in a web of questions she did not know how to answer. The night stretched on, and though her body cried for rest, her mind remained awake, circling around a single thought. Humans were not what she had been taught, and this one, Elias, had already forced her to see that truth. When sleep finally took her, it came with unease. For the first time in her life, Zerath feared not the enemy's weapon, but the strange possibility that her beliefs might have been wrong. The dawn broke slowly over the ruined land, painting the sky with pale streaks of gray and orange. The battlefield that had seemed endless the night before now looked quiet, almost peaceful, though the scars of war remained. Burned ground, broken machines, and the faint smell of smoke still hung in the air. Elias rose first, his senses sharp even though his body longed for rest. He had trained himself to sleep lightly, never allowing his guard to fully drop. Beside the burned wreckage, Zerath stirred awake. Her movements were stiff, her wound still fresh, but her eyes opened with alertness. Even in pain, she carried herself with the pride of a commander. For a moment, she studied him. He was crouched by the fire, checking the weapon he had kept close through the night. His face was calm, but there was something in his eyes that reminded her of a storm held back by sheer willpower. He was not careless nor weak. He had made a choice last night, but that choice had not made him foolish. When he noticed her watching, he gave a small nod. You should eat something. The walk ahead will not be easy. Zerath frowned. Walk ahead? Where are you taking me? Out of this field, Elias said. Staying here is a death sentence. Patrols will come. Machines will sweep through. If you want to survive, you move. The word survive struck her harder than she expected. She had prepared herself for death when he first found her. Yet here she was, still alive, now being told to think of survival. Zirath shifted uncomfortably. And what do you expect in return? Gratitude? Obedience? Elias shook his head as he packed his supplies. Nothing. But I will not leave you here to die. The simple certainty in his tone unsettled her. He spoke as though his path was clear, as though sparing her life and helping her onward was as natural as breathing. Zirath's pride battled within her. To follow him felt like weakness, but to stay behind meant certain death. Finally, she pushed herself to her feet. Very well, but do not think I will be your burden. Elias gave a faint smile, though it did not reach his tired eyes. Then keep up. They set out together, moving across the rough ground. Zirath's steps were slow at first, her injury forcing her to lean against the jagged remains of machines when her strength wavered. Elias noticed but said nothing. He simply adjusted his pace, walking slightly ahead, yet never leaving her too far behind. As they walked, the silence stretched between them. Zirath kept her thoughts guarded, but her eyes moved constantly, watching him, watching the land, calculating. Every so often she would catch him glancing back to check on her. Each time he quickly turned his gaze away, as if he did not wish to make her uncomfortable. Hours passed before Zirath finally broke the silence. Why do you not ask me questions? Do you not want to know who I am? What rank I hold? What secrets I may carry? Elias glanced at her. If you wanted me to know, you would tell me. If you do not, then it is not my place to force you. She blinked at him, confused. But information could help you. It could help your people. You spare me, yet you do not even try to use me. I am not here to use you, Elias said simply. I am here to keep you alive. The rest is your choice. Zirath fell silent again, his words stirring the same storm inside her as the night before. Choice. Always choice. Humans, she realized, seemed obsessed with it. By midday, the heat of the sun pressed down on them. They stopped near a cluster of rocks where a trickle of water ran through the cracks. Elias filled a small container and handed it to her. She took it reluctantly, but she did not refuse. As she drank, she asked, Your people fight with such unpredictability. I have seen human soldiers charge when they should retreat. I have seen them risk themselves for the weak. Tell me, what drives that madness? Elias thought for a long moment before answering. Maybe it looks like madness to you, but to us it is courage. It is the belief that some things are worth more than safety, that saving one life can be more important than winning a battle. Zirath tilted her head. Saving one life? Even in enemies? Elias looked at her steadily. Yes, the idea unsettled her again. In her world, lives were weighed like tools, each measured by how much they could serve the whole. But Elias spoke as if every life had its own worth, even hers. Their journey continued into the evening. The land grew more dangerous, the sound of distant engines rolling closer. At one point, they spotted a patrol moving across the horizon, machines scanning the ruins for survivors. Elias pulled Zirath down into the cover of the rocks. She crouched beside him, her breath held, her heart racing. The machines passed slowly, their lights sweeping across the land. For a tense moment, one beam slid dangerously close to where they hid. Zirath's hand instinctively went to her weapon, but Elias placed a hand lightly against her arm, shaking his head. She froze, torn between instinct and his steady calm. The machines moved on, their lights fading into the distance. Only when the silence returned did Elias release her arm. You would have revealed us, he said quietly. Her pride stung, but she knew he was right. And you trusted them not to see us? No, Elias replied. I trusted patience. Sometimes the best action is to wait. Zirath studied him, realizing again how different his thinking was. Where her training had taught her to strike first, his way was to measure, to hold back until the right moment. When night came again, they found shelter in a collapsed structure. Elias built another small fire, its light dancing across the broken walls. Zirath sat opposite him, her eyes never leaving his face. Finally she spoke. I do not understand you. My people call your kind dangerous, merciless, but you show mercy. They say you are reckless, but I see patience. They say you kill without reason, yet you choose to save me. Elias looked into the fire, his voice steady. Maybe your leaders fear what they do not understand. Humans are not perfect. Some are cruel, yes, but many of us believe in more than survival. We believe in compassion, even for those who call us enemies. Zerath felt a strange weight in her chest. She wanted to argue, to dismiss his words as lies, but every action she had seen from him supported his truth. After a long silence, she said softly, "If you believe so much in compassion, then what happens when it betrays you? What if I rise tomorrow and kill you while you sleep?" Elias met her gaze, his eyes calm. "Then that is your choice. But if I let fear of betrayal control me, then I would become the very thing I fight against." His answer left her speechless. She had expected threats, anger, or at least suspicion. Instead, she found a strength she could not name, a strength that came not from his weapon but from his belief. As the fire burned lower, Zerath leaned back against the wall. She could not sleep, her mind restless with questions she had never asked before. All her life she had believed humans were monsters. But now, sitting across from Elias, she wondered if perhaps the real monsters were the lies she had been told. The alliance between them was fragile, built not on trust, but on necessity. Yet in her heart, Zerath knew something had begun to change, and though she did not yet understand it, she felt the truth pressing closer with each passing hour. The night passed slowly, and the morning light broke across the ruins with a dull glow. Elias rose first, as always, his eyes scanning the horizon for danger. Zerath stirred after him, her body stiff from rest and her mind heavy with questions. Every hour she spent with him made her world feel less certain. The image of humans as merciless killers no longer matched what she saw before her. Elias carried his weapon with discipline, but he had not once raised it against her even when she had been at her weakest. Instead, he had given her food, water, and bandages, things no enemy should have offered. When they set out again, the land ahead grew harsher. Broken towers stretched into the sky like the bones of giants. Smoke still rose from distant craters, and the ground was littered with twisted metal. The silence felt heavier here, broken only by the occasional echo of falling debris. As they walked, Zerath finally broke the silence. "I do not understand you," she said, her voice low. "You fight with compassion, but how do you know it will not destroy you? Mercy can be used against you." Elias glanced at her but kept walking. "It can," he admitted. "But so can hatred. Hatred blinds. It turns every choice into destruction. Mercy is risk, yes, but it also gives something hatred never can." "And what is that?" Zerath asked. "Hope," Elias said simply. The word hung in the air between them. To Zerath, hope had always been tied to victory, to the success of her people. But Elias spoke of hope as something deeper, something that came from the choices of individuals. She wanted to dismiss it, yet the conviction in his voice would not let her. By midday, they reached a narrow canyon where jagged rocks formed a path between steep walls. Elias slowed, his senses alert. "Stay close," he said quietly. "This place is a trap waiting to happen." Zerath bristled at his tone, but she obeyed. She had seen enough of his instincts to know he was rarely wrong. They moved carefully, their footsteps echoing faintly against the stone. The air was still, too still, and every shadow seemed to watch them. Then it happened. From above, figures appeared, soldiers of Zerath's own kind. They leapt down onto the path, weapons raised, voices sharp. Zerath froze. Her heart raced. These were her people, her fellow warriors, and yet in this moment she was not sure what they would do. The leader of the squad stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he saw Elias. "A human," he spat. Then his gaze shifted to Zerath, and confusion flickered across his face. "Commander Zerath? You are alive?" Zerath straightened, her pride returning like armor. "Yes," she said firmly. "I survived the battle." The leader's eyes darted between her and Elias. "Why are you with him? Why is he not dead?" Zerath opened her mouth but found no words. To admit the truth would sound like betrayal. To lie would mean denying the very choice Elias had made. Elias stood calmly beside her, his weapon lowered but ready. He did not speak, did not defend himself. He only waited, as if trusting Zerath to decide. The leader raised his weapon. "Step aside, Commander. We will finish him." Zerath's chest tightened. This was the moment she had always believed in. Humans killed without mercy, and her people responded in kind. To allow Elias's death would be easy. It would erase the questions stirring inside her. But as she looked at him, standing quietly with no fear in his eyes, she remembered the water he had offered, the bandages he had wrapped around her wound, the patience he had shown when she doubted him. He had spared her when he could have ended her life, and now she stood in his place. The leader's weapon hummed, charging for a shot. Zerath's hand moved before her mind fully decided. She stepped in front of Elias, her voice sharp. "No, you will not kill him." The squad froze, stunned. The leader's eyes widened. "What are you saying?" "He is the enemy!" Zerath's voice trembled, but she did not lower her stance. "He spared me. He treated my wounds. He chose not to kill when he had every reason. If I allow his death now, then I am no better than the lies I was told." The soldiers looked at one another, confusion spreading among them. None dared lower their weapons, but none fired either. The leader growled. "You have been fooled. He is tricking you with weakness." "Is it weakness," Zerath shot back, "to choose life over death? To see more than the orders given to us?" Silence followed. Elias remained still, his calm presence steady at her back. For the first time, Zerath realized she was no longer speaking for him. She was speaking for herself. The leader's face hardened. "You are not the commander I once followed. If you protect this human, you betray your people." Zerath's heart pounded. She knew the weight of his words. But as she looked at Elias, she also knew the truth of her own. Slowly, she lowered her weapon, not in surrender, but in defiance. "If showing mercy is betrayal, then perhaps our people have lost their way." The leader hesitated, torn between anger and disbelief. Finally, with a sharp gesture, he signaled his squad to retreat. "You are on your own," he spat. "When you realize your mistake, it will be too late." The soldiers melted back into the shadows, their footsteps fading. Zerath stood frozen, her body tense, her mind spinning. Elias spoke softly behind her. "You did not have to do that." She turned to him, her face pale but her voice steady. "Yes, I did. Because for the first time I saw what mercy truly means. You showed it to me. And now I have chosen it for myself." Elias gave a small nod, respect shining in his eyes. "Then you understand." The word struck deep. She did understand, though it frightened her. Mercy was not weakness. It was strength of a kind she had never known, and once chosen, it could not easily be forgotten. As night fell, they found shelter once more. Zerath sat by the fire, staring into the flames. Elias rested nearby, his eyes half closed. For the first time, Zerath did not see him as an enemy. She saw him as something else. A teacher, perhaps, or a mirror showing her what she could become. She whispered to herself, barely audible, "Humans are not monsters. They are something far more dangerous. They are free." And with that truth, she knew her life would never again follow the path her leaders had set for her. The fire crackled softly in the ruins as night settled around them. Zerath sat in silence, her eyes locked on the flames. She had stood against her own soldiers earlier, something she never thought she would do. The weight of that choice pressed heavily on her chest. Elias sat nearby, sharpening the edge of his blade with calm, steady movements. He did not question her, did not demand explanations. His silence was almost more unsettling than his words. It left her alone with her thoughts, and those thoughts stirred like restless storms. Finally, she spoke. "Do you trust me?" Her voice was quiet, but it carried across the fire. Elias did not look up from his work. "I trust your actions," he said. "Words can lie. Choices cannot," Zerath frowned. "And if tomorrow I chose differently? If I turned on you?" Elias stopped sharpening the blade and set it aside. His gaze met hers, calm and steady. "Then I would deal with it. But until then, I will walk beside you, because trust is not about certainty. It is about faith." The word faith was strange to her ears. Among her people, faith was given only to leaders, to orders, to victory. Elias spoke of it as something given between individuals, fragile yet powerful. She did not know what to do with it, but part of her wanted to hold on to it. When morning came, they left the ruins and followed a broken road that wound through the hills. The sky was gray, heavy with clouds, and the air carried the scent of ash. Yet for the first time, Zerath noticed something beyond destruction. Wildflowers had begun to grow along the edges of the cracked stone, small and fragile but stubbornly alive. She stopped to look at them. Elias noticed and slowed his pace. "Strange, isn't it?" he said. "Even after fire and ruin, life finds a way to return." Zerath bent down and touched a flower's petal with her clawed finger. "We burn everything, and still it grows back." "Maybe that's the lesson," Elias said. "No matter how much we destroy, the world will keep trying to heal. The question is whether we will help it, or keep tearing it apart." His words stirred something in her chest. She had been trained to see strength only in conquest. But here was a different kind of strength. The strength of survival, of renewal, of choosing to protect instead of destroy. As they traveled further, they came across signs of struggle. Abandoned camps, broken weapons, scorched earth. But they also found people, not soldiers, not warriors, survivors. Families hiding in the ruins, trying to rebuild small shelters, cooking whatever scraps they could gather. When the survivors saw Elias, they reached for weapons in fear, but he raised his hands and lowered his blade. "We're not here to harm you," he said calmly. Zirath felt the eyes of the survivors shift to her. Their fear deepened at the sight of her tall figure, her sharp armor, her alien features. She could almost hear their thoughts: monster, enemy, destroyer. For the first time, she felt shame under their gaze. A small child peeked out from behind a broken wall, staring at her with wide, frightened eyes. Zirath froze. She had seen countless enemies fall on the battlefield, but she had never been looked at this way. Not with hatred, but with fear so raw it pierced her. Elias noticed her hesitation. He crouched down, his voice gentle as he spoke to the survivors. "We need food and water, and we can help you in return. We can share what we have, and we can defend you if danger comes," the survivors whispered among themselves. Finally, one of the older men stepped forward. "The human we may trust, but her, she has killed our kind. She is not welcome here." Zirath lowered her head, expecting Elias to agree. Instead, he spoke firmly. "She is with me. If you trust me, you trust her. Judge her not by what you fear, but by what she does." The words shocked her. He defended her even when he had no reason to. She had not asked for his protection, yet he gave it freely. The survivors hesitated, then reluctantly allowed them to stay. That night, Elias helped repair one of their broken shelters. Zirath, unused to such work, stood uncertainly at the edge. The survivors avoided her, their eyes filled with suspicion. But then, the same small child approached her again, holding a cracked bowl. He did not speak, but he held it out to her as if asking for help. Zirath's claws were not made for such delicate tasks, but she forced her hands to move carefully. She repaired the bowl with a piece of wire she found, her movements slow and awkward. When she handed it back, the child's eyes lit up. He whispered something she could not understand and ran back to his family. It was a small act, almost nothing. Yet in that moment, Zirath felt something shift inside her. For once, she had given instead of taken. Later, as the survivors slept, Elias spoke quietly to her. "You see now, they will not trust you quickly. But every choice matters, even the smallest ones." Zirath stared into the dark sky. "I do not know if I can change who I am." "You already are," Elias said simply. The days passed, and their small group moved together. Zirath began to learn the rhythm of survival outside of war. She carried supplies, repaired tools, even helped gather food. Each act felt strange, but also strangely freeing. Yet danger was never far. One evening, as they searched for shelter, a group of raiders attacked. These were not soldiers of her kind, nor were they disciplined fighters. They were desperate scavengers armed with crude weapons, hungry and ruthless. The survivors panicked, but Elias moved swiftly, his blade flashing as he defended them. Zirath joined him without hesitation. Together they pushed the raiders back, driving them into the shadows. When the fight ended, the survivors looked at her with different eyes. No longer only fear, but also gratitude. One of the women stepped forward and placed her hand over her chest, a gesture of respect. Zirath felt her throat tighten. For the first time, she was seen not as a destroyer, but as a protector. That night, as the campfire burned low, Elias sat beside her. "You fought not for orders, not for victory," he said. "You fought to protect. That is the difference." Zirath looked at him, her voice unsteady. "Why do you keep teaching me these things? Why do you care if I change?" Elias's eyes were tired but steady. "Because every life matters, yours too. If one person can change, then maybe others can. Maybe even whole worlds can." His words struck her deeper than any blade. She had spent her life believing change was weakness, but now she began to see it as strength. As dawn broke, she stood on a hill overlooking the land. The world was scarred, but in the distance she saw smoke from small fires where survivors gathered. Life continued, fragile but stubborn. Elias joined her on the hill. For a long moment they said nothing. Then Zirath spoke. "I thought humans were monsters. I thought mercy was weakness. But now I see mercy as the only thing that can end this endless war." Elias gave a faint smile. Then you understand more than most. Zerath's gaze hardened with new resolve. If my people will not see this truth, then I will show them. Even if I stand alone, Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. You will not stand alone. The words filled her with a strength she had never known. For the first time, she believed a different future was possible. Not one of conquest, but of peace. And so their journey continued, not just across the ruins of a broken world, but into the unknown path of mercy, a path that could reshape everything they both believed in.